She fed him every single day for 3 months, never asking for a single naira. But when her entire world burned to ashes and he vanished without a trace, Blessing had no idea that the homeless man she'd been feeding was about to change her life in the most shocking way possible. The evening rush was dying down when Blessing noticed him. A man in tattered clothes stood at the edge of her food stall, his eyes fixed on the pot of jollof rice. She'd seen plenty of hungry people in Acacia, but something about the way he stood there, quiet and dignified despite his appearance, made her heart squeeze. Blessing had been running this small food stall for almost a year now, ever since she aged out of the children's home at 18. The transition had been brutal. One day she had a bed and 3 meals guaranteed. The next day she was on her own in Lagos with nothing but 2,000 naira and the clothes on her back. She'd spent her first week sleeping at the bus stop, terrified and alone, until Mama Joy had taken pity on her and connected her with Mr. Emeka, who rented her a tiny room for 15,000 naira a month. The food stall had been her salvation. She'd used her last money to buy a used table, some pots, and ingredients. The first week, she'd barely made enough to eat. But slowly, painfully, she'd built up a small customer base. Office workers who liked her jollof rice. Students who appreciated her generous portions. Elderly people who enjoyed her respectful manner. Now, at 19, she was surviving. Barely. But surviving. "Uncle, you want to eat?" she called out to the man. He approached slowly, his voice low and cultured in a way that surprised her. "I have no money now, but if you can help me, I will pay you back." Blessing looked at the man properly. His clothes were dirty and torn, his hair was unkempt and dusty, but his eyes were clear and intelligent. There was something about him that didn't match his appearance. She glanced at her small metal till where she kept the day's earnings. She'd made just enough today to buy tomorrow's ingredients and have a little left over. Her room rent was due in 2 weeks, and Mr. Emeka, her landlord, never showed mercy to late payments. Every naira mattered. Every single one. But she'd been hungry before. She remembered those nights at the orphanage when dinner was just gari and sugar because donations had been low that month. She remembered the hollow feeling in her stomach, the way hunger made it hard to think or sleep. She remembered what it felt like to be completely helpless, dependent on the kindness of others. "Sit down," she said, reaching for a plate. "Don't worry about payment." The man's eyes widened with surprise and something that looked like relief. "Sister, you don't have to. I said sit." Blessing heaped rice onto the plate, added her special stew with plenty of sauce, and 2 pieces of chicken. The other vendors were packing up their stalls for the night, casting curious glances their way. She could feel their judgment but ignored it. The man sat on the small wooden stool beside her stall and ate slowly, like he was savoring every single bite. His table manners were careful, deliberate, not what she expected from someone living on the streets. When he finished, he carefully placed the plate down and stood, looking at her directly with an intensity that made her slightly uncomfortable. "My name is Samuel. I will not forget this kindness. I'm Blessing. May God bless you, Uncle Samuel." He nodded slowly, as if committing her face to memory, then disappeared into the evening crowd of Acacia. Cars honked in the distance, generators hummed from nearby shops, and the usual chaos of Lagos surrounded them. Blessing watched him go, feeling a strange mixture of satisfaction and worry. She'd just given away a meal that represented a significant portion of her profit for the day. But it had felt right. She began packing up her stall, washing the plates Samuel had used, covering her pots, counting her money. Tomorrow she'd need to buy rice, tomatoes, peppers, chicken, and cooking gas. The numbers were tight, as always. She said a quick prayer that tomorrow's sales would be better. Blessing thought that would be the last time she'd see Samuel. She was wrong. The next evening, Samuel appeared again, standing in the same spot as if he'd never left. Blessing felt an unexpected warmth in her chest when she saw him. And the evening after that, he came again. By the end of the first week, Blessing found herself automatically setting aside a plate for him before she even saw him approaching. It became a ritual, as natural as breathing. They began to talk during those brief moments before she closed her stall. At first, the conversations were simple. Weather, the day's customers, the noise of Lagos traffic. But slowly they deepened. Samuel spoke proper English, the kind you heard from educated people or radio presenters, which puzzled Blessing. His vocabulary was extensive, his grammar perfect. Sometimes he'd use words she didn't fully understand, then catch himself and explain them patiently. "Uncle Samuel, you went to school?" she asked one evening, her curiosity finally getting the better of her. He paused mid-bite, his eyes becoming distant, focused on something far away that she couldn't see. "Long time ago. Life has a way of changing things. What did you study?" "Business. Economics. Things that seem useless now." He smiled, but it was sad. "What about you? Did you finish secondary school?" "Yes. The orphanage made sure of that. I even wanted to go to university, study hospitality management." She laughed bitterly. "But that costs money I'll never have." "Never say never, Blessing. Dreams have a way of surprising you." 3 months passed like this. Samuel arrived every evening without fail, rain or shine. If Blessing had a good day, she'd add extra chicken to his plate. If she had a bad day, she'd still make sure he had something to eat, even if it meant going home with less money than she'd planned. The other vendors started whispering. She'd catch them staring, shaking their heads, making comments just loud enough for her to hear. One morning, Mom Ngozi, who sold fruits at the stall next to hers, pulled Blessing aside. The older woman's face was concerned but also judgmental. "That man you're feeding every day, people are saying he's not well in the head. Why are you wasting your food on him? You're a young girl struggling to survive, and you're feeding a madman for free." Blessing felt her temper rise. "He's not mad, Mom Ngozi. He's just going through a hard time. Is it a crime to help someone?" "Help?" Mama Ngozi scoffed. "You're barely helping yourself. This is Lagos, Blessing. Nobody survives here by being too soft. You need to think about your own future." "Maybe my future includes being the kind of person who helps others." "You're too soft. That's why you'll never get ahead in this Lagos." Mom Ngozi walked away, shaking her head. But Blessing didn't care what they said. The truth was, Samuel had become the closest thing to a friend she had in this massive, lonely city. He listened when she talked about her dreams of maybe owning a proper restaurant one day, with real walls and a roof, not just a roadside stall. He encouraged her in a way that felt genuine, not patronizing or fake. Unlike the other vendors who saw her as competition, or the customers who saw her as just a service provider, Samuel saw her as a person. She'd been so alone since leaving the orphanage. This friendship, strange as it was, meant something to her. Then Mr. Emeka showed up at her stall one Tuesday evening, his face set in hard lines. He was a portly man who owned 3 buildings in the area and treated his tenants like they should be grateful for his mere existence. "Blessing, your rent is going up next month. 5,000 naira more." Her stomach dropped. "What? Sir, that's too much. I can barely afford what I'm paying now. This is Lagos. Everything is going up. If you can't afford it, there are plenty of people who can." He adjusted his agbada with an air of finality. "I'm being generous, actually. I could charge more. But sir, please, I need time to." "1 month. That's all the time you have." He walked away, leaving Blessing standing there with her hands shaking as she stirred her pot. 5,000 naira more. That was almost a third of what she currently paid. Where would she find that kind of money? That evening, Samuel noticed her distress immediately. "What's wrong?" She told him about the rent increase, her voice breaking as she tried not to cry. Samuel listened intently, his jaw tight with an emotion she couldn't identify. Anger? Frustration? Something else? "Don't worry," he said quietly, but there was steel in his voice. "Things have a way of working out. You're strong, Blessing. Stronger than you know. She wanted to believe him, but lying in her tiny room that night, staring at the ceiling with its water stains, she felt anything but strong. But 3 days later, Blessing saw something that made her blood run cold. A man in an expensive agbada, the traditional flowing robe worn by wealthy Yoruba men, was walking down their street with the air of someone who owned the world. Another man in a suit followed him with a notepad, writing things down as the first man pointed at different stalls. Behind them walked a third man, tall and muscular, who surveyed the street like a bodyguard assessing potential threats. When they reached Blessing's spot, the man in the agbada stopped. He looked at her stall with the critical eye of someone evaluating property, not seeing the person behind it. "This one too," he said to the man with the notepad. "Mark it." They moved on without acknowledging Blessing's existence, but she felt a chill run down her spine. Something bad was coming. She could feel it. That weekend, Blessing found a letter taped to her stall when she arrived to set up. It was typed on official-looking letterhead, crisp and formal. The header read, "Benson Properties and Development Limited." She read it with growing horror. The letter was from someone named Chief Benson, who claimed to own multiple properties in Ikeja. He was offering to buy out all the vendors on the street to build a commercial plaza, a modern shopping complex that would bring progress and development to the area. The compensation he offered was insultingly low, barely enough to cover 2 months' rent, let alone help her start over somewhere else or buy new equipment. Several vendors were gathered nearby, reading similar letters. Their faces reflected the same shock and anger Blessing felt. Mr. Timothy, who'd been selling shoes at the corner for 15 years, crumpled his letter and threw it on the ground. "This is robbery. Pure robbery. Where does he expect us to go with this pittance?" "We should fight this," said another vendor. "We have rights." "Rights." Momen Ngozi laughed bitterly. "This is Lagos. When a big man wants something, what rights do small people have?" Blessing clutched her letter, her mind racing. This stall was everything she had. Without it, she had no income. She'd be back on the streets, back to that terrifying helplessness she'd felt when she first left the orphanage. She couldn't go back to that. She wouldn't. Over the next 2 weeks, she watched vendors begin accepting Chief Benson's offer. First, Mr. Timothy packed up his shoe stall, muttering about retiring to his village. Then Momen Ngozi took the money and moved to a different area. Then others, one by one, like dominoes falling. Each time someone left, Blessing felt more alone, more exposed. The street was emptying out. Her customers started going elsewhere, probably figuring her stall would close soon too. Her sales dropped. But still, she refused to sign the papers that kept appearing on her stall. Then Bruno arrived. It was a Thursday afternoon, during the lunch rush. Blessing was serving a customer when she felt someone's presence, heavy and intimidating. She looked up to see a man standing in front of her stall. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with a scar running down his left cheek that gave his face a permanently menacing look. His clothes were casual but expensive, and he wore gold rings on 3 fingers. He didn't introduce himself, just stood there until her customer nervously took his food and left. The other customers in line suddenly remembered they had somewhere else to be. "You Blessing." His voice was deep, flat, emotionless. "Yes. Can I help you? Chief Benson sent me." "You didn't respond to his letter." Blessing's heart was pounding, but she kept her voice steady. "I'm not selling." Bruno smiled, but there was no warmth in it, nothing human. It was the smile of a predator who'd cornered prey. "That's not wise. Chief Benson is a generous man, but his patience has limits. Stubborn people always regret their choices." He leaned closer, and she could smell his cologne, expensive and cloying. "Think about it. Think very carefully." After he left, Blessing's hands wouldn't stop shaking. She had to sit down, had to take deep breaths to calm herself. The other vendors who'd witnessed the exchange looked away, not wanting to get involved. Fear was contagious in Lagos. Samuel appeared for his evening meal and immediately noticed something was wrong. Her face must have shown her terror because his expression darkened in a way she'd never seen before. It transformed him, made him look almost dangerous. What happened? She told him about the letter, about Chief Benson's plan, about Bruno's visit. With each detail, Samuel's expression grew grimmer. When she finished, he was silent for a long moment. Be careful, Blessing. Very careful. I can't just give up my stall, Uncle Samuel. It's all I have. Without it, I'm nothing. I know. He looked like he wanted to say more but stopped himself. His hands were clenched into fists. Just promise me you'll be watchful. These people, they don't play fair. That night, Blessing lay awake, Bruno's words echoing in her head. Stubborn people regret their choices. Despite the pressure, despite the fear that sat like a stone in her stomach, something unexpected happened. Blessing introduced a new dish to her menu, a spicy chicken and plantain combination that she'd been perfecting for weeks. She'd been too nervous to try it before, worried that customers wouldn't like it, that she'd waste ingredients and money. But now, with everything falling apart anyway, she figured she had nothing to lose. The response surprised her. Office workers from the nearby buildings started coming specifically for the new dish. They'd queue up during lunch hour, some of them calling ahead to make sure she'd have it ready. Within 2 weeks, her customer base had actually grown, and for the first time in months, she had a little extra money. Not much, but enough to make her dream feel slightly less impossible. She allowed herself to imagine bigger things. Maybe she could save enough to rent a small shop with actual walls and a roof. Maybe she could buy better equipment, a proper stove instead of her temperamental burner. Maybe she could even hire someone to help her during the rush hours. The dreams felt fragile, like soap bubbles that might pop at any moment, but they were there. She shared this hope with Samuel one evening as he ate his meal. The sun was setting, painting the Lagos sky in shades of orange and pink, and for a moment, the chaos of the city felt almost peaceful. You know what, Uncle Samuel? I've been thinking. If my business keeps growing like this, maybe in a year or two, I could actually rent a proper shop. Nothing fancy, just a small place with a roof and maybe 2 tables inside. Samuel looked at her with an intensity that made her pause. You deserve that and more, Blessing. Don't let anyone take your dreams from you. One day, when I have my restaurant, you'll eat free for life. I promise you that. Something flickered across his face, an emotion she couldn't quite read. Pain, regret, hope. That's a kind promise, he said softly. But even as her business improved, the pressure from Chief Benson intensified. More vendors continued to leave. The street that had once been bustling with life was now half empty. Blessing's stall stood out more, became more visible, more vulnerable. She felt like a lone tree on an empty plain, exposed to every storm. Bruno appeared twice more over the next month. He never said much, just stood there, his presence a threat in itself. Once he picked up one of her pots and examined it, his meaning clear, everything she had could be taken away. Another time, he ate from her stall, paying with a crisp 1,000 naira note and telling her to keep the change. The money felt dirty in her hands. The other remaining vendors avoided eye contact with her. They'd accepted that she was doomed, and they didn't want Chief Benson's attention to shift to them. Only Mama Joy, the elderly vegetable seller, still spoke to her kindly, though even she looked worried. Child, are you sure you're doing the right thing? Mama Joy asked one morning. Sometimes pride isn't worth your life. It's not about pride, Mama. This stall is all I have. Without it, I'm back to nothing. Mama Joy sighed. Just be careful. These big men, they don't like to lose. Samuel seemed increasingly troubled during this time. He'd arrive for his meal and sit quietly, often staring into the distance as if wrestling with something heavy. His conversations became shorter, more distracted. Several times, Blessing caught him watching her with an expression that looked almost guilty. Uncle Samuel, are you okay? She asked one evening. He snapped back to attention. Yes. Just thinking. About what? About choices. About the things we do and the consequences that follow. He smiled, but it was strained. Nothing for you to worry about. But Blessing did worry. Samuel had been her constant for 3 months, the one stable thing in her increasingly chaotic life. The thought of losing him too was almost unbearable. One evening, after finishing his meal, he looked at her with an intensity that made her uncomfortable. Blessing, if something happens and you don't see me for a while, know that I'm grateful for everything you've done. Every single day, every plate of food, every kind word. You've given me more than you know. Uncle Samuel, you're scaring me. What's going to happen? Nothing. Nothing. I'm just saying in case. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Life is unpredictable, that's all. He left that evening with a backward glance that felt like goodbye, and Blessing's stomach twisted with foreboding. The next day changed everything. Blessing arrived at her usual spot at 6 a.m. to set up for the morning rush. She liked getting there early, when the street was still quiet and she could prepare her ingredients in peace. But as she approached, she saw something that made her stop dead in her tracks. Chaos. Complete chaos. Her stall was destroyed. Her pots were overturned, the contents spilled across the ground. Someone had poured palm oil over everything, making the mess even worse. Her small table was smashed, one leg completely broken off. Her bags of rice had been slashed open, the grains scattered everywhere, mixed with dirt and oil. Her carefully arranged spices were dumped out, her cooking utensils bent and damaged. The financial loss made her dizzy. This wasn't just vandalism. It was the destruction of her entire inventory. She'd just restocked 2 days ago, spending almost all her savings to buy fresh ingredients. Now it was all ruined, completely unsalvageable. Blessing stood there, unable to move, unable to process what she was seeing. Her hands started shaking. Then her legs. Then her whole body. She sank to her knees in the mess, not caring that oil was soaking into her clothes. The other remaining vendors looked away when they saw her. Everyone knew who was responsible. Everyone knew this was Bruno's work. But no one would say it out loud. In Lagos, you learned quickly when to keep your mouth shut. She spent the entire morning cleaning up. Her hands were raw and bleeding by the time she finished, cut on broken pottery and rough concrete. The mess was gone, but so was everything else. She had nothing left to sell. Her stall was empty. Blessing. She looked up to find Samuel hurrying toward her. For someone who lived on the streets, he moved with surprising energy and purpose. When he saw the destruction, his face transformed. The quiet, humble homeless man vanished, replaced by someone burning with barely controlled rage. Who did this? His voice was low, dangerous. Who do you think? Blessing's voice was hollow. But I have no proof. No witnesses. Nothing. Samuel helped her finish cleaning without another word. His anger was palpable, filling the space between them. When they were done, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small bundle of Naira notes, carefully folded and held together with a rubber band. Take this. Uncle Samuel, I can't. Take it. Please. He pressed the money into her hand. It was about 2,000 Naira, mostly in 50 and 100 Naira denominations, the kind of small change people gave to beggars. Where did you get this? People give me money sometimes. Not often, but sometimes. I've been saving it. His eyes met hers, earnest and determined. You fed me for 3 months without asking for anything. This is nothing compared to that. Tears rolled down Blessing's cheeks, hot and unstoppable. The kindness broke something inside her that had been holding firm. She cried for the loss, for the fear, for the loneliness. Samuel stood nearby, not touching her but present, solid, real. With his money and the little she had left in her savings, Blessing calculated that she could restock, but barely. She'd have to buy the cheapest ingredients, skip the chicken, reduce her portions. She'd be operating on the thinnest possible margin with no room for any more mistakes. She spent the day buying what she could afford and setting up again. By evening, she had a reduced menu and a heavy heart. That's when Chief Benson himself appeared. He was even more imposing in person than she'd imagined. A large man with a commanding presence, dressed in expensive traditional wear that probably cost more than she'd made in her entire life. He moved with the confidence of someone who'd never heard the word no and meant it. He looked at Blessing's rebuilt stall with something like amusement, as if her persistence was entertaining rather than admirable. "You're a stubborn girl. I respect that, actually. But respect doesn't pay bills." He pulled out an envelope from his agbada, thick with what was clearly cash. "This is my final offer. It's actually more than what the others got, out of respect for your determination. Take it, rebuild somewhere else, and save yourself more trouble." Blessing's voice shook but held firm. "This is my livelihood, sir. This is all I have. Please, just leave me alone." Chief Benson's smile vanished like it had never existed. His eyes went cold, calculating. "I've tried to be nice. I've been patient. I've even increased my offer. Remember that when things get worse." He dropped the envelope on her table with a finality that felt like a threat. "You have 1 week to reconsider." He walked away, and Bruno, who'd been standing nearby the whole time, smiled at her. That predator smile that promised pain. Samuel, who'd been watching from a distance the entire time, approached after they left. His face was pale, and he looked genuinely frightened in a way that scared Blessing even more than Bruno's threats. "Blessing, maybe you should take the money." She stared at him in shock. "Uncle Samuel, I don't want anything to happen to you." His voice cracked slightly. "These people are dangerous. More dangerous than you know. Then I'll be careful. But I won't give up. I can't." Samuel nodded slowly, that troubled expression back on his face, deeper than ever. "You're braver than I ever was," he whispered, so quietly she almost didn't hear it. That night, Blessing lay in her tiny room, staring at the ceiling, listening to Legos humming outside her window. She kept hearing Bruno's earlier warning in her head, playing on repeat: "Stubborn people regret their choices." She wondered what form that regret would take. The frantic knocking came at 2 a.m., violent and urgent, the kind of knocking that meant disaster. Blessing jerked awake, her heart already pounding before she was fully conscious. For a moment, she lay frozen, disoriented, wondering if she was dreaming. Then the knocking came again, harder, more desperate. "Blessing. Blessing, wake up." She recognized the voice, Mr. Johnson, the night guard who watched over the street where she had her stall. She scrambled out of bed, nearly tripping over her own feet, and yanked open the door. Mr. Johnson stood there, breathing hard, his uniform disheveled. "Your stall. There's a fire." The words didn't make sense at first. Her brain couldn't process them. Fire. What fire? Then understanding crashed over her like cold water. She ran. She ran faster than she'd ever run in her entire life, her bare feet slapping against the concrete, her nightgown flapping around her legs. She didn't feel the pain when she stepped on something sharp. Didn't notice the people she passed who turned to stare. Didn't hear Mr. Johnson calling behind her to slow down. All she could think was, "Not again, please God, not again, I can't lose it again." But she was too late. By the time she reached her spot, flames were consuming everything. Her stall, her carefully rebuilt inventory, the new cooking equipment she just bought, all of it burning in the night. The fire was massive, angry, reaching up toward the dark sky like it wanted to devour the stars themselves. The heat was intense even from several meters away, making her skin prickle and her eyes water. People had gathered, watching. Always watching. This was Lagos, where tragedy drew crowds like moths to a flame. But no one was helping. No one was doing anything. The fire service arrived eventually, their truck rolling up with sirens that seemed too loud and too late. They sprayed water, went through the motions, but there was nothing left to save. By the time they got the fire under control, Blessing's stall was gone. Completely gone. Not damaged, not partially destroyed, utterly obliterated. Just a blackened patch of ground where her dreams had been. One of the firemen, a tired-looking man with soot on his face, approached her. "Looks like faulty wiring," he said, his voice professional and detached. "These illegal electrical connections, they're dangerous. You're lucky no one was hurt." Blessing stared at him. Faulty wiring. Illegal connections. The lies came so easily to him, or maybe he actually believed them. Maybe in his world, stalls didn't get burned down by rich men who wanted the land. Maybe in his world, everything had a logical, innocent explanation. "It wasn't faulty wiring," she said quietly. He looked uncomfortable. "That's what the preliminary assessment shows. If you want to file a complaint, you can visit the station tomorrow." But his eyes said, "Don't bother, nothing will come of it." After the fire service left, after the crowd dispersed, after everyone went back to their lives, Blessing stood there alone. Dawn was breaking over Lagos, painting the sky in shades of grey and pink. The city was waking up, generators starting, vendors setting up their stalls. Life was continuing for everyone else. But for Blessing, everything had stopped. She walked to the edge of what used to be her stall and sat down on the curb. The concrete was still warm from the fire. Ashes floated in the air around her like grey snow. She stared at the destruction, her mind blank, unable to process the magnitude of what she'd lost. The other vendors arrived to set up their own stalls. They saw her sitting there, saw the burned patch, and understood. Their faces held pity and fear in equal measure. Pity for her, fear for themselves. This was Chief Benson's message to all of them. See what happens when you refuse? No one approached her. No one offered comfort or help. They'd gotten the message loud and clear. Helping her would make them targets too. In Lagos, survival often meant looking out for yourself and only yourself. Mama Joy arrived and saw the destruction. The old woman's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes filling with tears. For a moment, Blessing thought she would come over, would break the unspoken rule and offer comfort. But then Bruno appeared, walking slowly down the street, surveying his handiwork. His eyes met Mama Joy's, and the warning was clear. Mama Joy looked away and set up her vegetable stall in silence. Blessing sat there as the morning passed into afternoon. People walked by, stepped around her, avoided her eyes. She'd become invisible, a cautionary tale, a ghost haunting the scene of her own death. She kept looking around, hoping to see Samuel. He hadn't come for his evening meal yesterday, which was unusual but not unheard of. But now today, when she needed him more than she'd ever needed anyone, he was nowhere to be found. Samuel, her only friend in this massive, cruel city. Samuel, who listened to her dreams and encouraged her. Samuel, who'd given her his savings when her stall was vandalized. Where was he? As the sun began to set, painting the Lagos sky in shades of orange and red that reminded her too much of the fire, Blessing finally stood up. Her legs were stiff from sitting for so long. Her throat was dry. She hadn't eaten or drunk anything all day. She had nowhere to go. Mr. Emeka would expect his rent in a week, and she had no way to pay it. Without the stall, she had no income. Without income, she had no future. The math was simple and devastating. For the first time since leaving the orphanage, Blessing felt completely and utterly alone. She'd lost everything, her business, her independence, her dignity. And now, it seemed, she'd lost Samuel too. Days blurred together like watercolors in the rain. Mama Joy found Blessing sitting by the burned patch on the second day. The old woman had watched long enough, and her conscience finally won over her fear. "Child, you can't stay here. Come, stay with me. It's not much, just floor space in my room, but you can't be on the street." Blessing wanted to refuse, didn't want to put Mama Joy at risk, but she had nowhere else to go. "Thank you, Mama," she whispered. Mama Joy's room was even smaller than Blessing's had been, just one room with a curtain dividing the sleeping area from the cooking area. But it was shelter, and it was offered with genuine kindness, which made it feel like a palace. Blessing picked up odd jobs where she could find them. She helped Mama Joy sort vegetables in the early morning, earning a few hundred naira. She ran errands for busy vendors, carrying heavy bags to and from the market. She swept floors for shop owners who took pity on her. Anything to make money, anything to contribute to Mama Joy's expenses, anything to feel less like a complete failure. It wasn't enough to survive long term, but it kept her fed. Barely. A week passed. Then 2. Every day, Blessing watched the burned patch where her stall had been, hoping against hope that Samuel would appear. But he never did. She asked around, desperate for any information. "Have you seen the homeless man who used to come here? Samuel?" People shook their heads. The man who usually slept near the bus stop, another homeless person Samuel sometimes talked to, said, "He left suddenly one night, about 3 days before your fire. Haven't seen him since. Didn't say where he was going." The worry gnawed at Blessing like a living thing. Had something happened to Samuel? Had Chief Benson's people hurt him because he'd helped her? The guilt was crushing. What if her stubbornness, her refusal to accept Chief Benson's offer, had gotten Samuel hurt? What if he was lying somewhere, injured or worse, and it was all her fault? She searched. During her free time, she walked through the areas where homeless people gathered, asking if anyone had seen Samuel. She checked the hospitals, terrified of what she might find. She even went to the police station, though the officer barely looked up from his phone when she tried to file a missing person report for a homeless man. "Madam, homeless people move around. He probably just went to a different area. Unless you have evidence of foul play, there's nothing we can do." Samuel had vanished like he'd never existed. And with him went the one connection that had made Blessing feel less alone in Lagos. Construction began on the cleared street. Heavy machinery rolled in, yellow bulldozers and concrete mixers. Chief Benson's workers started erecting tall metal fences around the entire area, transforming the space that had once been home to small businesses into a construction site. The commercial plaza was becoming real, concrete and steel rising from the ruins of people's livelihoods. Blessing watched from a distance, her heart breaking with each passing day. That could have been her future, a proper shop in a nice plaza, legitimate and protected. But it would have been built on surrender, on letting Chief Benson win, on abandoning everything she believed about standing up for what was right. Was it worth it? The question haunted her nights. Had her pride destroyed her? Should she have just taken the money? Mama Joy found her crying one evening, sitting outside the older woman's stall, staring at the construction site across the street. "Child, you can't keep living like this. Maybe it's time to leave Lagos. Go somewhere else, start fresh." "And go where, Mama Joy?" "I have nothing. Lagos is all I know. The orphanage was here, my stall was here, everything I've ever known is here." "Then start over. You're young, strong, healthy. You can rebuild." But Blessing had no energy left to rebuild. She felt hollow, scooped out, empty. She'd lost her business, her independence, her room, and her only friend. What was left to rebuild with? What foundation was left to build on? That Thursday, 3 weeks after the fire, Blessing sat outside Mama Joy's stall helping her arrange tomatoes into neat pyramids. It was mindless work that let her thoughts wander, though they never wandered anywhere good. The construction site across the street was busy with workers and machines, the sound of progress that felt like mockery. Then she heard the engines. At first, she didn't look up, assuming it was just another delivery truck or construction vehicle. But the sound was different, multiple engines, expensive engines, the kind of smooth, powerful hum that came from luxury vehicles. She glanced up and her hands froze on the tomatoes. 5 black SUVs rolled down the street in perfect formation, so sleek and expensive they looked out of place in this part of Acadia where most vehicles were battered Danfos and commercial buses. The SUVs had tinted windows, chrome details that gleamed in the afternoon sun, and an air of authority that made everything else seem shabby in comparison. Workers at the construction site stopped what they were doing. Vendors craned their necks to see what was happening. Even the constant Lagos traffic seemed to pause, though that might have just been Blessing's imagination. The vehicles parked in a neat line in front of the construction site fence, and doors began opening. Men in expensive suits emerged, carrying briefcases and folders. They moved with the confident efficiency of people used to power, used to being obeyed. But it was the man from the third SUV who made Blessing's heart stop completely. He stepped out slowly, and Blessing felt like she was watching a movie, like this couldn't possibly be real. He was tall and clean-shaven, his hair neatly cut in a professional style. He wore a suit that looked like it cost more than she'd earned in her entire life, tailored perfectly to his frame. His bearing was confident, authoritative, commanding. Government officials flanked him on one side, lawyers with thick briefcases on the other. And it was Samuel. The tomato Blessing had been holding fell from her numb fingers and rolled across the ground. She stood slowly, her legs shaking, her mind unable to process what she was seeing. This couldn't be the same man. It was impossible. This wasn't the disheveled homeless man who'd eaten from her stall every evening. This wasn't the quiet, humble person who'd helped her clean up after the vandalism. This couldn't be Samuel. But it was. Those were his eyes, his face, his voice. Just transformed, polished, restored in a way that made him look like a completely different person. Like he'd been playing a role before and had finally removed the mask. Samuel, or whoever he really was, walked straight toward the construction supervisor with the commanding stride of someone used to being in charge. His voice carried across the street, clear and authoritative, cutting through all other sounds. Stop all work immediately. This site is under investigation, and all construction must cease until further notice. The construction supervisor, a stocky man in a hard hat, turned red in the face. Who are you? You can't just come here and... One of the lawyers, a sharp-looking woman in a navy suit, stepped forward smoothly. This is Samuel Adewale of Adewale Holdings. And yes, he absolutely can. We have court orders authorizing the immediate cessation of all construction activities on this site pending investigation into fraudulent property acquisition. She produced documents from her briefcase with practiced efficiency. The name hit the crowd like an electric shock. Whispers erupted immediately. Samuel Adewale? The Samuel Adewale? I thought he was dead. Mama Joy grabbed Blessing's arm so hard it hurt. Did they say Samuel Adewale? The Samuel Adewale who used to be one of the biggest businessmen in Lagos? The one who disappeared years ago after his company collapsed? People thought he died, or fled the country, or went mad. Child, do you know what this means? Blessing's legs felt weak. She couldn't speak, couldn't move, couldn't do anything but stare. Samuel Adewale. The homeless man she'd fed every evening, the quiet person who'd listened to her dreams and encouraged her, was Samuel Adewale. Her mind raced back through every conversation they'd had. The educated way he spoke. His proper English. The way he sometimes used business terms before catching himself. The guilt in his eyes when Chief Benson's people had threatened her. It all made sense now. Terrible, stunning sense. As if sensing her stare across the street, Samuel turned. His eyes scanned the gathered crowd until they found her. For a moment, the powerful businessman facade cracked, and she saw the man she'd known. Uncertainty flickered in his eyes. Vulnerability. Something that looked almost like fear. Then he started walking toward her. The crowd parted automatically, people stepping back, creating a path. Everyone was whispering, pointing, trying to understand what was happening. Why would Samuel Adewale, this powerful man, be walking toward a poor girl who'd lost her food stall? When Samuel reached her, he stopped at a respectful distance. Up close, the transformation was even more shocking. He smelled of expensive cologne. His suit was immaculate. Everything about him screamed wealth and power. But his voice, when he spoke, was the same. Blessing. Just her name, but it carried weight. I owe you an explanation. She found her voice, though it came out as barely a whisper. You're not homeless. I was. For 5 years, I was exactly what you saw. Living on the streets, eating whatever scraps I could find, sleeping in doorways. Everything you saw was real. He glanced back at the construction site, at his lawyers who were now serving papers to the supervisor. But I need to tell you the whole story. Will you listen? Blessing nodded, still unable to fully process what was happening. Mama Joy was gripping her arm like she might float away. Samuel took a deep breath. 5 years ago, I was a successful businessman. I had a company, Adewale Holdings. We dealt in real estate development, construction, property management. I had properties, investments, a reputation. I'd built it from nothing, worked 20 years to create something solid. His jaw tightened. Then my business partner, a man I'd known since university, a man I trusted like a brother, destroyed it all. He paused, and Blessing saw pain flicker across his face, old wounds that had never properly healed. He falsified documents, made it look like I'd been embezzling funds from our company. He created fake transactions, forged my signature, built an entire paper trail that pointed to me. By the time I realized what was happening, by the time I understood that my friend was betraying me, it was too late. I'd lost everything. My reputation, my money, my home, my position in society. Everything I'd spent 20 years building, gone in 6 months. Why would he do that? Blessing asked. Greed. Simple, ugly greed. He wanted the company for himself, wanted to cut me out and take full control. And he did it so cleverly, so thoroughly, that I couldn't fight back. I had 2 choices: spend years in legal battles I wasn't sure I could win, or disappear. You chose to disappear. I was a coward. The admission seemed to cost him. I was broken, devastated, betrayed. So I ran. I let everyone think I'd fled the country or died or gone mad. I lived on the streets, became invisible, convinced myself I deserved it. For 5 years I was nobody. Just another forgotten person in Lagos. Blessing's throat was tight. Then what changed? Samuel's eyes met hers, and she saw something fierce there. One evening, I was so hungry I couldn't think straight anymore. Hunger does that, makes everything narrow down to just the next meal. I approached a young woman's food stall, ready to beg, ready to promise payment I knew I could never deliver. And this woman, this girl who was clearly struggling herself, who was just trying to survive, gave me food. Not because she had plenty. Not because I deserved it. Just because I was hungry and she had a good heart. Tears were running down Blessing's face now, silent and unstoppable. You fed me, Blessing. You talked to me like I was human when the rest of the world looked through me. You shared your dreams with me, treated me with dignity when I'd forgotten what that felt like. And you did it every single day for 3 months, never asking for anything in return. I didn't know who you were. That's exactly why it mattered. His voice was fierce now. You didn't help Samuel Adewale, the businessman. You helped Samuel, the hungry man. You showed me kindness that had nothing to do with what I could offer you. That kind of kindness, it's rarer than diamonds in this world. He turned back toward the construction site. My business partner, the man who destroyed me? His name is Chief Benson. The words hit Blessing like a physical blow. Her knees actually buckled, and Mama Joy had to hold her up. What? When I saw what he was doing to you, to all the vendors on this street, it woke something up in me. I realized I'd been hiding long enough. Your kindness gave me back something I'd lost, my will to fight back. So I started investigating. I documented everything, every shady deal, every property he acquired through intimidation, every bribe he paid. And I reached out to old allies, people who'd believed in my innocence, people who'd been waiting for me to come back. He pulled out his phone, an expensive device that seemed alien compared to the man she'd known. It took time. It took planning. It took rebuilding trust and gathering evidence. But I built a case, not just against what he did to me 5 years ago, but against everything he's been doing since. Around them, lawyers were spreading out through the construction site, putting up official notices, speaking with workers. Government officials were taking photographs, making notes. The whole operation was shutting down. Chief Benson didn't just steal from me. He's been running this scheme for years, forcing out small business owners, acquiring properties through fraud and intimidation, building his empire on the backs of people who couldn't fight back. It ends today. Blessing's head was spinning. You're really Samuel Adewale? He smiled, and there was the man she knew. I'm really Samuel. Everything else, the business, the money, the power, those are just details. I'm still the same person who sat at your stall every evening and ate your rice. I just showered and got my life back. Despite everything, despite the shock and confusion, Blessing laughed. It came out shaky and slightly hysterical, but it was a laugh. Police vehicles arrived within minutes, their sirens cutting through the afternoon air. Through the growing crowd, Blessing saw Bruno being led away in handcuffs. The menacing enforcer who'd threatened her, who'd destroyed her stall, who'd burned down her dreams, now looked small and ordinary, just another criminal being arrested. His eyes found hers across the distance, and for the first time, she saw fear in them instead of threat. Then Chief Benson himself was brought out, shouting about lawyers and mistakes and how dare they, his voice carrying that same entitled arrogance even as handcuffs closed around his wrists. Do you know who I am? Do you know the people I know? You're all making a terrible mistake. One of the officers, unbothered by the threats, replied calmly. We know exactly who you are, sir. That's why you're under arrest. Samuel turned back to Blessing, and his expression shifted to something more vulnerable. I know I deceived you. I should have told you who I was, what I was doing. But I was afraid that if anyone knew, if word got out, Chief Benson would find out and hurt you even more than he already had. He destroyed my stall anyway. The words came out flat, hollow. I know. And I'm going to make that right. Blessing. I promise you. Uncle Samuel. She stopped, unsure what to call him now. Just Samuel. His smile was gentle, familiar. I'm still the same person who sat at your stall every evening. I just showered, got some decent clothes, and reclaimed my life. But inside, I'm still the man you showed kindness to. Despite everything, despite the shock and confusion and overwhelming strangeness of it all, Blessing believed him. She could see it in his eyes, the same person she'd known, just no longer hiding. Over the next few weeks, everything changed so fast it felt like living in a dream, or maybe a movie. Chief Benson's empire crumbled under investigation. The news was full of stories about fraud, intimidation, bribery. Properties were seized, bank accounts frozen, business licenses revoked. Dozens of his schemes came to light, years of victimizing small business owners who couldn't fight back. The small business owners he'd forced out began getting compensation. Not just the insulting amounts he'd offered, but real money, fair value for what they'd lost. Some chose to rebuild in the same area. Others took the money and started fresh elsewhere. Either way, they were finally getting justice. Samuel was everywhere in the news. The businessman who rose from the streets. Samuel Adewale's incredible comeback. From homeless to hero. Reporters wanted interviews. Business magazines wanted to feature him. Everyone wanted a piece of his story. But to Blessing, he was still just Uncle Samuel. He showed up at Mama Joy's stall one afternoon about 6 weeks after that dramatic day. He was wearing simple clothes, jeans and a polo shirt, looking more like the Samuel she'd known. He held a folder under his arm. I have a proposal for you, he said without preamble. Blessing looked up from the vegetables she was sorting. Mama Joy had been kind enough to let her keep helping even after Samuel had offered to pay for a hotel room. Blessing had refused, saying she owed Mama Joy too much to just leave. What kind of proposal? I'm rebuilding my business empire. It's going to take time, a lot of work, but I'm getting there. My reputation is being restored, old clients are coming back, new opportunities are opening up. He pulled out the folder and opened it. And I want to do something meaningful with this second chance I've been given. I want to open a restaurant. A real one, proper location, professional kitchen, good equipment, everything done right. Blessing's heart started beating faster. And I want you to run it. Samuel, I can't. Let me finish. He spread out documents on Mama Joy's table. It won't be charity, and I won't insult you by offering it as charity. You'll be my partner. Equal partnership, shared profits, shared decisions. You know food, you understand customers, you know what it means to work hard and serve people well. I'll provide the capital, the business expertise, the connections. Together we build something good. Something that matters. Blessing stared at the partnership agreement he'd laid out. It was official, legal, her name right there next to his in bold letters. Adewale and Blessing Restaurant Ventures. The terms were generous, more than generous. Equal split on profits after expenses. Her decision-making authority over menu and daily operations. His support with business strategy and growth. Why would you do this? Her voice cracked. You don't owe me anything. I just gave you food. You gave me more than food, Blessing. You gave me dignity when I'd lost it. You showed me kindness that expected nothing in return. You reminded me what it means to be human, to be good, in a world that had convinced me good people didn't exist anymore. He leaned forward, earnest. And because I believe you deserve a chance to make your dreams real. You told me once you wanted to own a proper restaurant someday. Well, here's your chance. But I don't know how to run a big restaurant. I just had a street stall. You know the most important things, how to cook food people love, how to treat customers with respect, how to work hard even when things are difficult. I can teach you the business side. We'll learn the rest together. He smiled. Plus, your jollof rice is still the best I've ever tasted. It would be a waste not to share it with Lagos. Tears blurred Blessing's vision. She looked at Mama Joy, who was openly crying and nodding encouragingly. She looked at the partnership agreement with her name on it. She looked at Samuel, who'd come back from nothing and was offering her a hand up, not a handout. Say yes, Samuel said softly. Say you'll take this chance. Say you'll build something good with me. Her hand shook as she picked up the pen he offered. Yes. Yes, I'll do it. 6 months later, Blessing's Kitchen opened its doors in a prime location in Ikeja, not far from where her small stall had once stood. The restaurant was beautiful, with warm lighting, comfortable seating for 60 customers, and modern decor that managed to feel upscale without being pretentious. The kitchen was equipped with everything Blessing had ever dreamed of, professional stoves, quality cookware, proper refrigeration, everything. But what made Blessing most proud wasn't the success, though the restaurant was thriving. It wasn't the money, though she was finally financially stable. It wasn't even the great reviews they were getting in food blogs and magazines. It was the 5 young people she'd hired, all from difficult backgrounds. Grace, who'd aged out of the same orphanage Blessing had. David, who'd been homeless until Samuel's organization found him. Ruth, a single mother struggling to feed her kids. Philip and Mercy, siblings who'd lost their parents. All of them getting their first real chance at a career, at stability, at a future. Blessing trained them herself, taught them everything she knew about cooking and customer service and working hard. She remembered what it felt like to have no one believe in you, to feel like the world had given up on you before you'd even had a chance. She was determined to be for them what Samuel had been for her, a person who saw potential where others saw problems. Samuel's business empire was thriving again. Adewale Holdings was back, bigger than before, with a reputation not just for success but for integrity. He'd been cleared of all old charges, his name restored, his position in Lagos business community re-established. He was once again Samuel Adewale, the respected businessman. But he still came to Blessing's Kitchen every Friday evening for dinner, without fail. They sat at their usual corner table one Friday evening, 6 months after opening. The restaurant was full, the sound of happy customers and clinking glasses filling the air. Blessing watched her staff moving efficiently through the space, serving food, clearing tables, making people feel welcome. Pride swelled in her chest. "Do you ever think about those 3 months?" she asked Samuel. "When you were living on the streets and I was feeding you?" "Every single day," Samuel admitted. "It was the worst time of my life, the darkest, most hopeless period I've ever experienced. But it was also the most important. It taught me what really matters in life." "And what's that?" "That kindness is never wasted. That one person choosing to be good can change everything, can save someone's life in ways they might not even realize at the time." He raised his glass of Chapman. "You saved me, Blessing. Not with grand gestures or big solutions. Just with consistent, simple kindness. You fed a hungry man and expected nothing in return. That's real power. That's what changes the world." Blessing clinked her glass against his, emotion thick in her throat. "You saved yourself, Uncle Samuel. You just needed someone to remind you that you were worth saving." "Maybe we saved each other then." She smiled. "I can live with that." As the evening wore on and customers came and went, Blessing looked around her restaurant and thought about the impossible journey from a small street stall to this. She thought about the struggles, the loss, the pain, the fire that had destroyed everything. And she felt grateful. Not despite those experiences, but because of them. Because all of it had been necessary. Every moment of hardship, every tear, every fear, every act of kindness, they'd all been threads in the tapestry that had led her here. If she'd accepted Chief Benson's first offer, if she'd given up when her stall was vandalized, if she'd stopped feeding Samuel, none of this would exist. She thought about the girl she'd been 6 months ago, sitting in the ashes of her burned stall, convinced life was over, convinced she had nothing left. She wished she could go back and tell that girl what was coming. That the homeless man she'd been feeding was about to change her life forever. That kindness, even when it seemed like the hardest choice, was always the right one. That losing everything was sometimes the only way to gain something better. But maybe that girl wouldn't have believed it. Maybe some lessons you have to learn by living through them, by walking through the fire and coming out the other side transformed. Samuel caught her eye across the table and smiled, and Blessing smiled back. They'd both been broken in different ways, both lost everything, both found something worth keeping in the most unexpected place, in the kindness of a stranger who became a friend. Sometimes that's how the best stories begin. Not with grand plans or perfect conditions. Not with wealth or connections or advantages. But with one person choosing to be good when no one's watching. With a plate of rice shared with someone who needs it. With the understanding that we're all one disaster away from needing help, and one act of kindness away from everything changing. Blessing went back to work, checking on her staff, greeting customers, making sure everything ran smoothly. This was her life now, built on a foundation of the simplest choice she'd ever made, to feed someone who was hungry. And she wouldn't change a single thing. Sometimes the smallest acts of kindness create the biggest miracles. If Blessing and Samuel's story reminded you that compassion can change everything, please share it with someone who needs hope today. For more stories that touch the heart and restore faith in humanity, subscribe to Folktales by Inaya. Your support helps us keep sharing stories that matter.